What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and show where I, Graham Jason Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network. Today we're talking the latest episode of WWE 24, focusing on WrestleMania 35, otherwise known here as WrestleMania New York. Why they call it WrestleMania New York and not WrestleMania 35, I have no idea. They started this stupid trend about 5-6 years ago. I think starting with WrestleMania 31, because if you go back far enough here in the WWE 24. The library of all the old episodes from years ago, because the first one aired about 5 years ago, focusing on WrestleMania 30. I think it aired right after the Rumble in 2015, so almost exactly 5 years ago. And I think they called it WrestleMania New Orleans. Why? I have no idea. They may have called it WrestleMania 30, but I don't actually remember what they did, because they did another one years later on WrestleMania 34 that was also in Los Angeles. So when they start repeating cities like they have in recent years, like when they go back to New York, or they go back to, Santa Clara, or they go back to, where was 33? Orlando. I know they're going to be in Tampa this year, so it's different, but that just doesn't really make much sense to me. Maybe it's because they want to emphasize the city they're in, because that plays a big part in these 24 specials, but that never really made much sense to me. Just call it what it is. It's WrestleMania 35. Anyway, so this I thought was another great 24 special. We've yet to see a bad one. They've been doing these for 5 years now. The WrestleMania ones never disappoint. I was especially looking forward to this one because I was at WrestleMania 35 last year, so it helped me kind of relive the nostalgia and the memories of being there for that great weekend. One of my favorite wrestling weekends to date. Going to not just WrestleMania 35 itself, but we were at TakeOver New York. We were at the TakeOver show a couple days before. We were at the G1 Supercard show. We went to Raw the next night. We went to legit almost everything. You can't go to everything, but we went to Access multiple times. We were at WrestleCon, a number of other autograph signings in the area. It was a wild 5 days. But every single moment, every single penny spent on that vacation, if you can kind of call it that, was well worth it. So anyway, we kick off the special. We hear from Becky, we hear from Kofi Kingston, the IKonics, Ricochet, who all talk about dreaming of having their WrestleMania moment. And Rollins says, despite the fact that he's been at several WrestleManias by this point, he was at WrestleManias 29 through 35. I mean, with the exception of WrestleMania 32, he was injured for that one. But he says it's something that you never really get used to, being at WrestleMania. So we see clips of all the media surrounding WrestleMania 35, the New Day announcing that it was going to be at New York at MetLife Stadium. It's not New York, it's fucking New Jersey, but whatever. It's in the New York area. When it was announced for MetLife back in March of 2018, I knew it was the moment they announced it for my neck of the woods over here in New York, New Jersey, the Northeast, so to speak. I knew I was going. There was no doubt about it. I was at WrestleMania 33, had an amazing time there in Orlando. Knew I had to go to this one. It might be an every other year thing at this point. I'm not going this year. I know that for a fact. I may go to SummerSlam. That's in Boston, but I'm probably not going to WrestleMania. But anyway, we see highlights from Access, Becky Lynch interacting with her fans, the New Day interacting with her fans. We see Miz's dad at Access coming out to, I think, the Miz's theme song, if I'm not mistaken. And the funny thing is, I actually met Miz's dad at Access. It might have been that same day. I met him, I want to say the Friday, because we went to WrestleCon on Saturday, so it must have been the Friday afternoon session. I was walking around with Alexis, and I'm like, holy shit, that's Miz's dad. And I walked up to him, and I got a picture, which is really cool, so I have that forever. So that was a highlight from the weekend. We hear from Kofi Kingston, who talks about Kofi Mania, the upsurge of popularity, the momentum that he's had really out of nowhere, because only a few mere weeks before Kofi Mania got started, he was just another guy in the roster. He was 1/3 of the New Day. They weren't really doing much. They weren't even involved in the SmackDown Tag Team title picture. They were just kind of there. So they bring in, Kofi Kingston as this main event player right around Elimination Chamber time after Mustafa Ali went down with the injury, who we do not hear from at all on this special, which I'm sure is no coincidence, which sucks, because, Mustafa got his moment taken from him, and Kofi kind of replaced him, which it worked out well. Kofi had the better story. He had been around for, almost 11 years at this point in WWE, well over 11 years on the main roster. And he was finally getting that big push towards the top of the card. And he called it a very special journey. Actually, he says to call it a special journey would be an understatement, because it's much more than that. We see the IKonics getting emotional, talking about WrestleMania, because it's been a very long journey for them as well. We see a video of Peyton Royce actually outside of a WWE show in Australia when she was 14 years old. And the interviewer was asking the fans, including Peyton Royce, who are you looking forward to seeing tonight at the show? And she was, gushing over John Cena. She's like, oh, I love John Cena. He's mine, blah, blah, blah. They talk about how they had their WWE dream together. They show highlights from their WWE tryout back, I believe, in 2014 when Bill DeMott was still there. They were the only two from their class that time that got hired, which is crazy. I thought I saw Toni Storm, but I may be mistaken. It may have been someone else, but I thought I saw Toni Storm, which would make sense because I think she did an Australian tryout around that point. I know she did another tryout in England like the following year, and she still wasn't signed, but that might have been Toni Storm. Anyway, so they talk about how, or we also actually see a clip from them doing a promo class when they were signed to NXT, and they were cutting a promo on each other and just kind of being the IKonics that we know and love today. And I say love in quotation marks. I'm an IKonics fan, but their on-air act is just so fucking obnoxious, which I guess is the point. They actually talk about that here, too. They say that they're as annoying in real life as they are on TV. Every little bit of it. And, Shawn Spears has backed that up. Seth Rollins has backed that up. A lot of people have backed it up. They seem like super sweet people. And I like the IKonics, maybe just because they weren't really doing it as much in NXT. And we haven't seen them in months on the main roster. They weren't even in the Women's Battle Royal last night. They weren't even in the Women's Rumble, which was kind of surprising. But anyway, they seem like super sweet people. I just cannot bear to listen to the act. It's like Lay Cool all over again. They were a good heel act, but it gets to a certain point where it's like channel changing worthy. Like it's that bad. But anyway, we hear from Seth Rollins next, who talks about how WrestleMania 35 is much different from WrestleMania 31 when he cashed in his Money in the Bank briefcase, became the WWE World Heavyweight Champion to close out the show. This is different because this feels like a culmination of everything he's endured and experienced, dating back to when he first got hurt in 2015 after his championship reign had ended because of the injury. He came back in May. He missed out on WrestleMania 32. He had his first WrestleMania back at 33. Had a pretty good match with Triple H, and he won. But that wasn't like the culmination. Like, he went on to become champion. Or no, he never won the title, actually, after that. He never ended up regaining the title in late 2016, not at all in 2017. He was a tag team guy for the better part of that year. 2018, he was the Intercontinental Champion, had that great IC title, not ladder match, but that triple threat with Miz and Balor. But he didn't really get back into the championship picture until just last year when he rekindled his rivalry with Brock going into WrestleMania like we see here on this special, which is pretty cool. He talks about how it's one of the biggest matches of his career and how, riding with Becky, going into WrestleMania and stuff like that and their history. We've already heard this before from Becky in her 24. We heard about it from Seth in his 365 a couple weeks ago. But they reiterated here, talking about how they, discussed, should we ride together into WrestleMania? Should we be seen together? And Rollins was like, because again, a lot like he talked about in Becky's 24 and his 365, how people already knew. They already kind of knew they were together after they had their first kiss over Rumble weekend. They weren't really trying to hide the relationship. There was no way they were going to be able to hide it. So they just kind of went forward with it. WWE, I think, made it official right after Rollins and Becky kind of made it apparent on their social media pages. I forgot, maybe, I don't know, in April? Early May? I don't really remember exactly what the exact timeline was. But they talked a lot about how riding in together and all that other stuff was really going to be hard to deny and hard to ignore, so they just kind of went forward with it. And like I said, they talked about how they had their first kiss over Rumble weekend, and Rollins said that it was cool to kind of be able to share the burden, which sounds like a negative thing, but it's really not, because Rollins was at the peak of his push at that point as the guy in WWE, going for the Universal Championship against Brock Lesnar, and Becky was also in the peak of her popularity too, as the man, going for the Raw Women's Championship, going for the Raw Women's Championship in the main event of WrestleMania, all this other stuff. So it was cool to be able to kind of share those pressures with another person who was going through the exact same thing. So we see clips of everyone arriving at the arena for WrestleMania Sunday. We see Zack Ryder trying to promote his podcast, the Wrestling Figures thing, with Miz's dad. He wants to have Miz's dad record an intro, and Miz interrupts it before he can go any further while they're ringside at WrestleMania. Not at WrestleMania itself, but the day of WrestleMania, which is hilarious. We also see John Cena joking around with the SNL guys, Michael Che and Colin Jost, who were part of the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, which was cool. He knows them from when he guest hosted, maybe once or twice. I know he guest hosted at least once, maybe twice, at least once a few years ago. We see Seth Rollins, and I saw this clip making the rounds a couple days ago. I didn't watch it then because I wanted to save it for now. We see Seth Rollins walking down the ramp, mocking Lacey Evans' entrance, which is hilarious. He goes, dun, 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 dun. And then the music actually plays, and he walks down the ramp like he's Lacey. And Lacey, we don't hear her reaction. We don't see her reaction. We just see her walk through the WrestleMania set or whatever, trying to practice her entrance, but I thought that was great too. Like, this is the shit that I watch for, honestly. Like, these type of interactions, the guys and girls just joking around, all that other type of shit. We see Batista chatting it up with The Undertaker. He's talking him up about he's gonna be using his moves during his match with Triple H later on in the show, and Taker said just to do him well, which was funny. We then hear from Ricochet, who's another focal point on this episode of 24. He talks about how Edge gave him some advice before the show, saying that just to soak in your entrance, dude. Just soak it in, go out there. It all goes through really, really fast. It goes by very, very quickly, so just soak it in while you can. Enjoy the fucking moment. Ricochet talks about how this is the biggest building he's performed in front of ever at MetLife Stadium. The only other one that comes close is Tokyo Dome, probably for Wrestle Kingdom, I would imagine. He said that he got lucky with his NXT, run just in general, but specifically his debut 1 year ago, almost exactly over WrestleMania weekend in New Orleans. He was a part of that awesome ladder match for the first ever North American Championship the ladder match to crown the first ever NXT North American Champion. He talked about how just the match itself was perfect for someone of his abilities. A high flyer, exciting performer, all that other type of stuff. For him to just go out there and do his fucking thing, win, lose, or draw, and just to go out there and wow the audience with his moves, he became a superstar just on night one from that performance alone. He said that he's put everything he's had into professional wrestling. He recalls actually signing his contract with WWE while sitting in his car after mailing it out when he called his mom, and she was happy for him, and it was a really cool moment to hear him talk about that. Rollins, we hear from him talking about how he watched Ricochet really kind of grow up in the business. They've had matches before in front of people, like 12 people in armories and shit like that, and to see where he is now is super cool. As cool it is for Ricochet, it's just as cool for someone like a Rollins, who saw Ricochet kind of come up through the ranks. Ricochet talks about, again, how he got lucky with opportunities, going from NXT to then performing on 3 shows at once. There were weeks like around this time a year ago, where Ricochet was on, like, Raw, SmackDown, a pay-per-view, and NXT. Like, legit within the same week, which is unbelievable. Like, no one's ever done that before, as far as I know. We've had some people appear in Raw and SmackDown, or Raw and NXT in the same week, or, Raw, NXT, and a TakeOver, or whatever, but never Raw, SmackDown, TakeOver, pay-per-view, and then NXT, like an episode of NXT. That's unbelievable. That's crazy. So anyway, we see all the fans filing in for WrestleMania. Everyone's super excited for the show. Unfortunately, I did not make the cut. I got there a little later. Not as late as I was for WrestleMania 33, but I was there on the later side before the kickoff matches started. So I was not a part of the footage here. I was not drinking in the fucking tailgating area. I was not dressed up like Hulk Hogan. So that's probably why I didn't make the cut. It looked relatively normal, whatever your definition of normal is. But anyway, because I'm an idiot in my own right, but I don't really do the dress up stuff. I don't really. That's not really my gimmick personally. But anyway. They recap the kickoff show, which included Tony Nese becoming the new Cruiserweight Champion by beating Buddy Murphy. We saw Carmella win the WrestleMania Women's Battle Royal. We see Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder win the Raw Tag Team titles. 15 years after they became friends, they're finally having a match at WrestleMania together, which is super cool. And not only that, but winning the Raw Tag Team titles, which is awesome. We see Kurt Hawkins with his wife at ringside, and she's really happy for him, and they're all crying, and it really meant a lot to a guy like Kurt, too, who's been losing now for, 2-3 years, and he finally won a match, which is awesome. We see Hulk Hogan returning in the opener to the show, courtesy of the WrestleMania host Alexa Bliss, and Hogan goes, "It makes me feel young again, brother." And then he's like, "I just wish it was the main event." Well, thank God it wasn't the main event, Hulk. Thank God. I love you, brother. I love Hulk Hogan. I know not everyone does anymore, or even did to begin with, but I'm still a Hogan fan, but even I'll say, thank God that was not the main event. A quick Hogan cameo in the first minute of WrestleMania is all we need of Hulk Hogan. We do not need another Hulk Hogan match. We don't need another drawn-out Hulk Hogan segment at WrestleMania. A quick cameo is all that he's good for at this point, which is great. Honestly, that's the perfect role for him. I'm a big Hogan fan. Great to see him, but there's no need to have him in the main event. So keep dreaming, Hulk. That's never going to happen. Anyway, so we hear from Rollins, whose match was changed, like right before it happened, from later on in the show, probably right before the main event, second to last, third to last maybe, to the opener. And he's freaking out, and he talked about this in his 365, how because the match got changed, he didn't really have time to react. He didn't really have time to get nervous or to think about this or that going wrong, whatever. He just had to go out and fucking do it. And that's really when you have your, you do your best stuff, is when you don't have time to think about it. You just go out there and wing it. You just go out there and do it. And you don't have time to be nervous about it. You don't have time to get anxious about it, And they recapped the match, which was an amazing moment. It was more of a moment than it was a match. And Alexis still talks about it to this day and us being there and how it was such a cool moment because it was over in like 2 or 3 minutes. We've never seen Brock get squashed quite that way before. So for that to happen was unbelievable. And he talked about how no one else can say, and I never really thought about this before, but he talked about how no one else can say they've beaten Brock for the Universal Championship of WrestleMania. But not only the Universal title, but any other title. The only other time that Brock has lost a championship of WrestleMania was WrestleMania 31, and that was also because of Seth Rollins. Now, he didn't pin Brock, but Brock was the champion going in, and Rollins was the champion coming out. So, yeah, he was the champion coming out of that show. And Rollins now has ended 2 different title reigns of Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. Never before has that happened. Brock went into WrestleMania 19, beat Kurt Angle for the WWE title. WrestleMania 20, he lost to Goldberg, but it wasn't a championship match. He came back for WrestleMania 29, the day after WrestleMania 28, didn't wrestle at 28, or didn't appear at 28. He did show up at WrestleMania 29, wrestled Triple H, got beat by Triple H, but again, no championship on the line. 30, he beat The Undertaker. 31 was the Rollins cash-in. 32, he beat Ambrose. 33, he beat Goldberg for the Universal title. 34, he beat Roman Reigns to retain the Universal Championship. And then 35, he lost to Seth Rollins. So, yeah, Seth Rollins has Brock's number, which is pretty crazy. I never really thought about it like that way before. But he talked about how he had time to hang out with Becky afterward because her match wasn't until, legit the very end. Rollins' match was at the very beginning of the show at 7 p.m., I believe, because the kickoff was at, 5 Eastern time. Becky's match didn't go on until, 12. So he had, 4 or 5 hours just to hang out with her, which is really cool. He talks about how the cameras asked him about what was that moment like sharing it with Becky. Because at that point, it wasn't really out there that they were together, so I'm sure he didn't really know how to answer it. But it became official soon after, on social media and shit like that. It became Instagram official, if you would call it that, if you will. But he just told the truth and how it really meant a lot to him. And, she means a lot to him. And he says, I love you. It was a really cool moment. Hey, you know what? Maybe I had to live for the cute shit, but I thought that was really cool. We hear from Ricochet, who said that he had nerves walking out there, had a great performance. Now, he and Alistair did not walk out as the new SmackDown Tag Team Champions, but they had a great performance nonetheless. For a team that went from vying for the Raw Tag Team titles on the Raw before WrestleMania, to then going for the NXT Tag Team titles to TakeOver, to then challenging for the SmackDown Tag Team titles at WrestleMania, it's unprecedented. That was unbelievable. So he has a great match, has a great performance, doesn't win, but he's still, over the moon with how he, performed at WrestleMania. So Triple H, not Triple H, but rather while Ricochet's talking to the cameras after the match, Shawn fucking Michaels comes up, who means the world to Ricochet, obviously, because he trained with him in NXT, always one of his favorites. And Shawn Michaels comes over and asked him, how it went, how was it, how do you feel, I'm really proud of you, all that other type of stuff. And it was a really cool moment, and Ricochet's over the moon. He's like, wow, I just had this WrestleMania moment, and then Shawn Michaels comes over and says that he's proud of me. What? That's mind-blowing, And he praises Shawn Michaels for really helping him out a lot, because he always he paid attention to the small things, but never the tiny, tiny things that made him that much better of a performer while he was in NXT. And he didn't get to work with him a lot. He was probably in Shawn Michaels' class the shortest, he said. But it was still something he cherishes very, very much. And Michaels always looked out for him in NXT, always enjoyed, working with him, learning under his, learning tree, being under his learning tree, Ricochet was. So he said, this is a dream come true. We then see Xavier Woods marking out to Batista's entrance theme song. He's always loved Batista's theme, and who doesn't? It's a great fucking song. It's up there as one of the best of all time. So they recap the Triple H Batista match, which people didn't love. We don't really hear from Batista here, which is fine, because we heard from Batista in his own 24 about the match, which was cool enough. But they recap the match. Triple H wins. Batista's done. The IKonics just talk about wanting to soak their moment in and challenging for the WWE Women's Tag Team titles at WrestleMania. And Billy talks about after they won the match, which was a great reaction. The match itself kind of sucked. I wasn't a fan of the IKonics winning, but whatever. I mean, I like the IKonics. I just didn't really want them to win. But you can't deny that it was a cool moment for them. Billy talked about how her body was overcome with emotion to the point where Peyton Royce had to pick her up. After the match ended, if you watch back the footage, they talk about how it was 15 years in the making. They talk about how it was the top moment in their respective careers. And it's just a really cool moment. Again, I'm not super happy with the fact that they won. The match itself was kind of poopy. And then the aftermath sucked because their reign was terrible. But the moment itself, you can never take that away from them. And that alone I thought was cool. Kofi talks about how it was a childhood dream to challenge for the WWE Championship at WrestleMania. And then the match happens, they recap the match and the finish and the crowd going crazy. I was again there for it, so I was able to relive that experience and that emotion all over again, which was so unbelievable. I'm not really sure it can be compared to anything else. It was so fucking cool to be there for that live in person and just to watch it too. It was a long time coming for Kofi Kingston. He says that everything happens for a reason, bringing up how if this moment happened 10 years ago when people originally pegged him to become this next WWE champion, he would not have been able to celebrate that moment with his kids. It probably would not have been as much as it did. And I completely agree. Everything happens for a reason. So the fact that it happened now compared to 10 years ago, it made this moment mean that much more. He talked about how it was the best moment of my career, winning the WWE Championship at WrestleMania. We see the New Day celebrating with Vince McMahon afterward, backstage, not in Gorilla. Is it Gorilla? It's like that backstage production area where Vince always sits. I guess it is Gorilla. But they hug him and Vince is freaking out. He's really happy. I thought that was a great shot. We then transitioned to the main event, the first ever all-women's main event of WrestleMania. Becky talks about how she didn't want anyone to talk to her going into her match. She was just uber-focused going into that main event. She talked about how you could hear the crowd chanting the entire time, specifically for her and no one else in the match. Not Ronda, not Charlotte, only her. She couldn't really hear everything because there was so much going on. It was late, but you could hear the crowd chanting. She could hear that they were hot, and she could hear that they were chanting for her specifically. And then we see the match. The match is recapped. Becky walks out, the first ever winner of the all-women's main event of WrestleMania, the first ever Raw and SmackDown Women's Champion. She said that, to be the first woman to main event WrestleMania, the first woman to hold 2 titles, was overwhelming, to say the least. She talks about, how everyone talks about you should soak in the moment, but it's hard when there's so much going on at once, and we see footage of her walking to the back in the Gorilla, Seth Rollins congratulating her. He's really emotional, and he said that, Becky, not Seth, goes, she says, I'm achieving all of my wildest dreams. So I thought that was a great note to end on. And then just recap WrestleMania in the whole. We hear from Kofi, who said it was a really special WrestleMania for the WWE Universe for sure, and that's a note that we end on here. I love the WrestleMania. I thought it was a great WrestleMania. I love this 24. Again, I'm definitely biased because I was there for it, so just to relive it was well worth it. And I thought this was absolutely fantastic. Relived all the key moments and really all the big matches from WrestleMania 35 and then some. The lead-up, the build-up rather, and then the aftermath, the event itself, the behind-the-scenes stuff. This stuff is never any less cool. So definitely check it out on the WWE Network, WrestleMania New York edition of WWE 24. It's been an annual tradition now for like 5 years. This might be the 6th one they've done. They've done one in every WrestleMania from 30 to 35, which is pretty fucking cool. I'm looking forward to the 36th one. So check it out right now on the WWE Network. There is some footage that is recycled. A lot of footage is recycled. Like the Batista footage is from his own 24. The Kofi footage is from his own 24. The Becky footage is from her own 24. And then Rollins' footage is from his own 365 that came out a couple months ago. So it's a lot of the same stuff we've seen before, but it's still very cool to see in one complete package. So again, check it out right now on the WWE Network, WrestleMania New York, WWE 24. And thank you guys for checking out my review of the episode. Very much appreciated. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more content. We'll be back soon with another new network and chill. I don't think anything new is airing after Raw tonight. If there is, I'll watch it, break it down, hopefully tomorrow. If not, soon. I know Miz and Mrs. is coming back this Wednesday after NXT. I will not watch it at the earliest until Thursday morning, because usually I watch NXT or Dynamite and then the other show right after that. So I will not watch Miz and Mrs. until Thursday and then break it down for Friday's Network and Chill. So we'll have Network and Chill now, a new one every Friday, breaking down Miz and Mrs., if not Saturday, assuming there's something airing after Raw starting either tonight or next week, whatever. But a lot to look forward to right here on the channel in the days and weeks to come, so stay subscribed for that stuff and much, much more. We are quickly approaching, actually, the 4,000 subscriber mark. We actually just surpassed 3,900 subscribers the other day, so appreciate your guys' support of the channel. Hopefully we can reach that 4,000 subscriber mark sooner rather than later. Until then, guys, have a great rest of your week. I'm Graham Jesus Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.